Sorry, I had my reminder at 5 till.
Was he supposed to come on early?
Yes, he was. She set it up for people to go in waiting rooms, but there's no one in there right now.
All right, it's looking better.
I think I just let him in.
Hey, Kit.
Hey,
How are you? Let me make this bigger for you, Dr. Hazelton. You got it. Are you seeing him?
Yeah, it is.
Let
black
me,
screen,
let
the
me
dark
see.
purple screen.
Hang on, let me just do this. That work?
No. Oh, it's a microphone.
We should just press that way and see if that'll let you show. Okay, here we go.
There it is.
Yeah, let me try one other quick thing here to see if I can get a prettier picture. No, okay. You still here?
Hey,
Hey,
Oh, yeah,
I'm doing
Okay.
well. Good to see you guys.
you too. Hey, Victoria, do you want to rename your?
I was just going in to do that right this minute. Thank you for reminding me. Rename. 2 R's, 2 T's, right? I should have that memorized. Wait, PhD, you're done side of your PhD. And then I'm gonna do this. Oh, come on. I
We're
hit.
recording, by the way, although that's gonna get edited, all this will get edited out, so.
Yeah.
What's that? What did you say?
We're recording. by the
Oh,
way.
great. Terrific. Move that wherever you want. Is that comfortable for you as you like? And I'm gonna just pop over here, close the door.
I had to just clear all the junk off one side of my desk so that nobody could see it.
Right.
I said, Dr. Hazelton, I don't know if you'll make introductions or not, but
No.
Kit is the executive director, correct? What is your title, official title?
CEO,
Queen?
President,
CEO of the
CEO,
chamber.
or Queen, but President, CEO.
Yeah, there's Leanne Briggs, and she is the vice president of
member services.
services, and she is also the director of Woman Up.
All right.
And I'm gonna pop around the corner. Do you need anything else from me? I'll be in the room, but do you need anything else from me right now?
No, ma'am, thank you so much.
Do you feel comfortable? I'm gonna put this back just a little so that,
So Leanne, you're gonna go blank. I'm
I
just-
am.
When the time comes. All right, and we're going to, we got about 45 minutes. Do you think we can do it in that amount of time, Dr. Hazelton?
Absolutely.
All
Yeah.
right, good. Then I thought what I'd do is start off talking a little bit about it, just doing an intro that includes information about silver linings from the pandemic. And then ask you questions what are y'all seeing in terms of what are mental health care practitioners seeing right now? And what might those behaviors look like in the workplace? So you could talk about that. I want to ask you about, have you heard about impacts of the pandemic on children and what y'all might be seeing that certainly could affect workers in the workplace?
Right.
That when these issues arise, and what form do they take in terms of your conversations with folks, employees? And what can a supervisor or business owner or coworker do if they're aware they've got a colleague in distress? Is there anything else I should ask you?
No, I mean, I think those topics can be broad, and I think we can cover a lot. So
Okay,
I can be long-winded, so I think I can fill up 45 minutes pretty well.
well, good. Okay, well then we have 5 minutes before we begin officially, so we'll wait until 4 to actually start so that we're in good shape. Hey, Leanne, I'm wondering if we should change the message at all. It says Asheville Chamber, and that's fine, or it says Asheville Cham.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to get it off altogether, but I'm not having any luck.
Yeah, okay, well, and it's not the triple dots, no. Hide non-video participants, how about that?
Is that something you're
I
doing
just hid
as,
you. I just hid you. I don't know how I had
oh, great. Oh, I bet you are. I bet Aaron's got you in as the,
as a co,
yeah.
okay.
Okay, so you can't see me anymore?
Not see you at all anymore.
Oh, good. Okay, I can still see myself, so that's good.
You're the woman behind the curtain, so that works.
That's the perfect place for me to be.
How long do you have the grandbaby here today?
Till about 12,
Oh my God.
because her meeting got moved up.
All right, well,
Yeah,
I bet that was fun.
yeah, kind of.
So Dr. Hazelton, you've been here since 2007. Am I right about that or not?
No, I've been off and on. So I came here for a year. So I've been here 5 years now, and then I was here 2 years prior to that for 1 year. So I came and left and then came back again. So
Where are you living?
where am I living now?
Yeah.
Hall Creek.
Oh, nice. So you're not in Hendersonville. You're actually in Buncombe County.
I am in Buncombe County. My children are in Buncombe County schools, and my wife works for Asheville City Schools. So we are definitely invested in Asheville for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. So what grade does your wife teach?
She is a speech language pathologist.
There we go. So she
teaches lots of grades. She actually works with preschoolers and high schoolers. So she does a little bit of it all.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, that's got to be a skill set to be able to work with kids of all those different ages, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, so as a psychologist, I can't I think for even a speech language pathologist, you have to have specialization or training in a certain area like that. So I see people that are 12 years and older. And so the fact that she can see people, she's done like nursing home work. She's done the whole spectrum during her career. So it's pretty neat. Yeah.
My mother was a 7th grade English teacher, and I think there's a special place in heaven for 7th grade, any type of teacher.
Right.
7th graders, holy crow.
That's like the peak of not wanting to be in school more than any. I mean, when you're in high school, you're starting to see college is on the horizon, and you start to see your future. When you're a little kid, you just do what you're supposed to do for the most part. You just accept it. 7th grade is like, wait a second. I don't want this anymore.
But my mother had us programmed all the time, and I quit everything in 7th grade just because I could.
Right.
And then added things back. But boy, I do not envy parents of 7th graders, and especially teachers of 7th graders. It's just
I have a 7th grader, so you're I'm having all kinds of emotions come up as you talk about it.
I bet. I was talking to one of our colleagues today, and she was talking about how, hey, she's got one that is just was killing her this weekend, and is just at the beginning. I hated the teen years overall, period.
Right.
I love babies. So Leanne had her 1-year-old grandson in the office this morning while his mom was at a visit. So
right.
That was, I don't have grandchildren yet. I don't know if we'll get them or not. All right, we're looking at 4 o'clock. So
Okay.
I'm gonna pause for a couple of seconds and then start into things since we're already recording. We don't have to worry about that. If that's,
I'm gonna start letting people in, Kit.
go ahead and let them in.
Okay.
So for paying you then.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're allowing folks to enter. We're going to wait a minute here before we actually get started. The beauty of recording this is that we will be able to allow people to, we'll post it to our website and allow people to come in and view it as they would like to. Phil, I see your face. And can you, if you speak, are you muted?
No, can you hear me?
Yes, and I'm not sure that we are, Leanne, I know you're in the background. I'm not sure we're supposed to have things established unless I'm missing something.
This is the way Kit said it. This is the way that
So will we be?
Aaron set it up, but I'm muting people as they come in.
I see. Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. I think we're about ready to get started. We're going to start again on that. Good afternoon. My name is Kit Kramer, and I'm President and CEO of the Asheville Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us this afternoon to talk about a topic that has become very, very timely, given the stress that we've all been through in the last few years with the pandemic. I truly think we need to find silver linings, and I think one of those silver linings is the fact that the public seems to be much more open in talking about mental health. So that's what we want to talk about today. I am so pleased that we have Dr. Garrett Hazelton, who is part of the Advent Health Outpatient Integrated Behavioral Health team. Dr. Hazelton works closely with primary care doctors to provide whole person care that heals the body, strengthens the mind, and lifts the spirit. He holds a doctorate in clinical health psychology from East Carolina University and is fellowship trained in health psychology through Duke University Medical Center. He joined Advent Health in 2017. Dr. Hazelton, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate your time. So I know that as I was talking with my colleagues via Zoom for the vast majority of the pandemic, I knew that there were stressors in people's lives. I mean, certainly caregiving stress and things of that nature. I did not realize how very stressful some of those situations were until we got back in the office together. We've been back since July, but I understand that that's an ongoing thing. So in terms of your practice and the practice of your colleagues, what are the mental health folks seeing right now in terms of what might behaviors be exhibited in the workplace that would cause you to think that there's something going on that needs to be addressed with behavioral health?
Right. There's a host of things. I mean, I think anytime people their behavior changes, it's something to note. Why that is, we can be curious about. But certainly, whether you're going to see alcohol use or substance use in the workplace would be doubtful. But people not showing up for work on time or leaving early, calling in sick, those can be for stress reasons, but we need to be curious about why those reasons might be. But a lot of times when people are undergoing stress, substances will certainly be leaned on across the population. Irritability, though, is something that we're definitely going to see with our coworkers. When we are enduring stress, that's one of the primary symptoms we will all experience. We don't have to have a mental health disorder to display irritability, withdrawal, things that are part of a mental health diagnosis, but maybe not as clinically significant. We can all experience those kinds
I
of
was about to say, if irritability is one of those things, I'm in trouble because
Absolutely. We all have that.
I will show it periodically. So is it irritability that may not be characteristic of that individual?
Absolutely. Yeah, just those changes. And so, I mean, irritability is a sign of something's not going right. As you're saying, we all experience stress. And before the pandemic, my caseload was full. So certainly when we layer the challenges and the stresses and dynamics of the political challenges, the racial tensions that came during those times, all the things we've experienced, what should we mask, should we not mask, all those questions, we had to have debates with our partners and our friends and our coworkers. And so certainly, but you're looking for changes in people's behavior, just any change really. For a lot of folks, they have left the workplace to find other jobs that they may realize, hey, this is too stressful for me to work this position. So, if somebody's not pleased or satisfied with their work, I think as an employer or as a coworker, we just need to develop and make sure we're keeping in touch with those folks, with all of our colleagues, to make sure that we have an eye on them and they have an eye on us as well. That's what really social support's all about. And most people's closest friends come from their workplace, really. So I think we have to see each other in some way as a social support or even a friend, sometimes even family.
So I totally agree with you. I spend a lot more time, frankly, with my coworkers than I end up spending with my family, even though I only have cats and a grand dog at home with my husband and I. But I guess during the pandemic, people couldn't get away from the home setting and maybe couldn't get a break from some of those issues. Did that play into it?
Oh, absolutely. The marital stressors, as an example, or even tensions with children in the home. So one strategy that we all implement for managing stress is to avoid the stressor. And we get that naturally through just going to work or going to exercise. My daughter reminded me yesterday of, can you believe we were wearing masks when we were outside in the beginning of this? While we were hiking, we were wearing masks. And so we were forced to be in close proximity with people. And those problems that are there that we all have are magnified when we don't have that opportunity to get the balance we need. So I think a lot of folks became imbalanced during the pandemic for sure.
What other behaviors might you see from coworkers that would be a signal that something may be going on?
Yeah,
Anxiety.
again, yeah, absolutely. Anxiety and depression, withdrawal and not wanting to talk. A lot of times people have made statements like, I'm just not going to say anything anymore. I'm tired of, people jumping down my throat. They're weary from the argument, weary from putting themselves out there and taking that risk in a meeting of something or something like that. And they're tired of being criticized or feeling criticized even. And so I think when people withdraw, and anytime people avoid or withdraw, that's a sign. And again, it's really just a change in their behavior more than anything. So someone who's usually very talkative and engaged, suddenly they're not as much anymore. And again, it's not a sign of major issues necessarily. It's just a cue to us to look into it. Certainly if people are getting aggressive, angry, cursing in in a context that we highly inappropriate, we definitely, that's going to be more of a sign of something serious going on. But most of the time, I think we're just going to see subtle changes. And so again, if you're in a relationship with the people you work with, if you know them, it's not so much about an exact sign or symptom. It's more about, are they shifting their behavior? Are they expressing themselves in different ways now? So, yeah. So.
Well, so when that happens, what should you do? What kind of recommendations do you have for us?
So as a, a colleague or a business owner, someone who's employing other people, if you have that relationship, if you don't have the relationship, I think you gotta know your people. You gotta know, at the beginning of this, you were asking me about a little bit about myself, and you gotta have that basic level of humanity with people. If it's not there, if you don't have strong relationships, that's the first step. And I think that goes a long way with people feeling known, heard, cared about. And then once that's established, I think it's more about checking in. I don't think we need to push people too far or too hard and hover over them, these kind of things, but giving them the opportunities. Hey, how's it going? This has been stressful for me. How's it going for you? So just making sure there's those check-in points. So some businesses will do things like have meetings and talk about, it's almost like a group therapy almost in reality, but it's just everybody's kind of expressing themselves, whether it be over lunch or, doing get-togethers outside of work. So we can have an opportunity for those casual conversations. And then, just depending on where you work, I think a lot of times there's an employee assistance program that a lot of places will have. It's okay to make those recommendations. I've noticed you're pretty stressed. You might consider this. I've done it myself before, something like that. So I think that's just some of the basic things you can do. But
we've talked about, we have a very low unemployment rate. We've also seen the great resignation of so many people leaving the workforce. And part of it, we're still unraveling what the great resignation is about, whether or not it's stress from people having to multitask to such a high degree. But I think in terms of businesses and trying to be employers of choice, employers that provide the kind of service that you mentioned, and an employee assistance program will set themselves apart from those that don't. So give me an example. Let's say, all right, I'm not only am I grouchy, but I'm cursing in a way that is hugely inappropriate and throwing things. What would you suggest to me?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, it goes back to that relationship, but, I think there's a balance between being firm with what the expectations of the workplace are, but also being compassionate on the other hand. And I think you can't be just compassionate and you can't be just firm as a business owner, and really as a parent or anyone. There's got to be a balance in those two ideas. But I think you deliver it with compassion, but there may be, hey, you got to get this taken care of because this is not healthy for the workplace, that your colleagues or you, and I want to see you thriving the way you were before. I want to know what's going on. And so go, this is, part of what we offer. And so take a couple of days off and go get this attended to, get an assessment, go see a counselor. Depending on how severe the situation is, though, I think it could just be, hey, why don't you take a day off and just spend some time with your family? Why don't you take a day off and go paddle on the river, whatever that person might need? And so, again, I keep saying it, but it gets back to the relationship. You don't really, some places I think, you could get away with cussing. In other places, it might not be that big of a deal, but if you know that person, you're going to know how big of a shift it is for them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think sometimes we have to say, you got to get this taken care of, or we're going to have to find a new way to move forward, both of us. Mm-hmm. Right. And so while we need compassion for people because we've all been through all these things, it's also we think about the customers and people coming into businesses and how that affects them, how it affects you as an employer if you own a business, that you have your own stressors and family as well. So we're trying to take care of each other, but also set boundaries with each other. And I think boundaries are hugely important. A lot of times folks don't express the boundaries of what is appropriate and what's not appropriate because things are just going well. And so it might be a little bit of a call to action to say, we need to discuss what we can and can't do in the workplace. I understand we have never really discussed this before. So you come at it with some compassion, but also with the firmness of setting the boundaries so that things can be healthy for everyone
Well,
going
you
forward.
mentioned the call to action, which is it's an interesting thing because I know that in the past, many times people weren't really willing to talk about mental health issues. Do you still find that's the case, or are things actually improving?
So yeah, I think it's improving. I don't know how significantly, it's hard to say, but I came from East Carolina, Eastern North Carolina, and Asheville is definitely just a little more open to mental health and discussing it than it was in a more rural area where I'm from. So I've had that experience and that transition personally, but I definitely think that there's more open dialogue about it. The long way to go, I would say. What was that?
The call to action that you mentioned, I mean, sometimes that could provide the impetus that an individual needs who may be facing a kind of a block about wanting to address something of that nature. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, I think that it's an opportunity. If really, like you're talking about the silver lining, it's a silver lining to be more than just an employer, to have that relationship, to say, hey, like, I get it. I've been under, like you said, irritability. If that's a problem, then we're all in trouble. But it's an opportunity through the irritability, through maybe even the cussing or whatever the problem might be that you're seeing, to develop the relationship, to say, I get it, but I want you to actually be well and taken care of here. This is something that I know has worked for some people. It's just a spectrum. It goes from mild irritability to maybe having too many drinks, to cussing in the workplace, to resigning impulsively, right? And so we all can be on the spectrum of mental health challenges. And at some point it becomes more grossly pathological for people, and where you get a diagnosis, but we're all on that continuum. So we really can all relate to each other. So yeah, the opportunity to through people's distress, to bring on a dialogue, to get to know them, and to help identify with them. We all suffer, and hey, this is what I would suggest you do. This is what I'm needing you to do as your employer. And so I think we can set the boundary. We can do it with compassion. We can develop the relationship all in that process. And across time, the stigma, if we're all kind of talking about this, we're all admitting to our weaknesses to whatever degree they are, to some extent. I think the stigma will improve over time. We got a long ways to go, but the pandemic has helped push that forward, I'd say.
Yeah. So maybe being a little more vulnerable with one another.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a challenging thing in business world, though. I have to say, a lot of what market is sellable is confidence and invulnerability. But maybe we have to create a new kind of, maybe it has to be cool to be a little vulnerable. Maybe it has to be maybe we can market that a little bit more. There's trends. And I know that confidence is important, and you want to instill confidence in the people that you're selling your product to, no matter what it is. However, people also can identify. If they can identify with you, though, they're going to trust you more, and it's just real. It's the real world too. It's not false bravado.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we began, we were talking about children,
Right.
and it's amazing to me. I've served on boards for the United Way and other places, and there's been discussion about in schools, principals saying that they need school counselors, school psychologists specifically, and elementary school is their biggest need because
Right.
of the number of kids having issues.
Right.
Have you seen that? Has it increased with the pandemic? Is it, tell us what you're seeing.
So yeah, I mean, I have, interactions with children, in the neighborhood, and I have, I see teachers, and folks that are serving children. I don't treat the smaller children myself, but certainly, a lot of the ways in which, especially smaller children, preschool children learn is through nonverbal communication. And so the mask, the lack of social interaction, as I was saying earlier, my daughter was talking about how we were wearing masks outside. But also my son was only 5 years old at that point and was suddenly, he didn't understand and couldn't really conceptualize why he couldn't see any of the friends in the neighborhood, abruptly. And so those things are traumatic. We use that word kind of more readily nowadays, but things are traumatic. There's a difference between trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, as an example, but we all experience these traumas and challenges, and sometimes they help us grow and learn how to cope with things. And other times children, they're in the midst of an adjustment while they're in the school. They're in the midst of not adjusting while they're in school. So they can't get past these challenges that they've endured. So both of the parents are at home. One of them is unemployed. One of them is trying to work from their basement or something like that, while two of the children are doing video school. And it sounds like screaming and chaos, right? And the parents are fighting because one can't keep it quiet and these kind of things. And the children, children experience these things and they're very resilient, but a lot more children were experiencing those kinds of things across the board, not just in their homes, but their family members, the grandparents not understanding why the parents aren't visiting. They're hearing this stuff. They're seeing the conflict. They're seeing their parents making maybe impulsive decisions to quit a job because of the stress. And they are kind of a little helpless as children. They just have to observe. They can't really take care of themselves fully. So the teachers are having to have direct contact with that, which is making them more weary and probably leading to them maybe leaving the job sometimes because it's just too much to see all this trauma firsthand. Children aren't behaving, aren't listening, and so they feel kind of like this is hard to do. And so and we're all feeling the byproducts of that when our children aren't getting the education because the teachers are short staffed, and so it's just kind of a ripple effect that occurs through our community.
I personally feel like we've gotten over a hump in terms of COVID. That
Right.
doesn't mean it's gone, and it doesn't mean it can't have a resurgence. And in
Right.
fact, I was hearing on the news that there's a likelihood we'll have a summer recurrence, and this may be a time to consider that the next set of the next booster shot or
Right.
something of that nature.
Right.
So, but I'm definitely things I think are better, and there's a return to normalcy. But even then, people are still, it's like a hangover from the pandemic. So
Right.
for those that may be reluctant to think about going and seeking out counseling help, what would happen? What do you focus on when you're talking in a session? If you get past the hurdle of actually getting in the door, what's that going to be like?
Yeah, so a lot of times people come in and say, a lot of the things I've been seeing lately is things like obsessive compulsiveness. So we needed to be, I was wiping down my groceries with Clorox wipe in the beginning of this thing. And parents were getting on their children, wear that mask, and businesses were telling patrons, you got to get that thing on. And so we had to be a little obsessive about mask wearing, sanitation, these kind of things, distancing. And so a lot of times people will come and say, I can't stop thinking about things. I can't turn my mind off at night. And, it's a pretty simple process. I think a lot of times people think, it's going to be talking about their mom the whole time, or some cliche that they've heard about seeing a psychologist or a mental health provider. But usually it's very practical. And a lot of times the most basic, normal, everyday mental health stuff I do is slowing down, writing it out, looking at the pros and the cons of decisions, and just it's like having a coach more than anything. Say, look, the tennis coach might say you're dropping your wrist a little bit too much, and I'm saying, hey, you're not attending to the advantages of this situation very much. As we speak, I'm hearing you talk about a lot of the negatives, and that's true. Let's turn our attention to over here, look at the positives, and it just kind of opens up ideas and doors. So, a lot of times when they walk in the office, they have a specific problem, like a marital stressor. And we just open it up and explore it and give them ideas of communication, ideas of boundaries, how to talk kindly and recognize when, hey, maybe your words aren't coming across as smoothly and eloquently as you think they might be. It gives people just an opportunity to self-reflect more than anything, hear themselves say certain things where they might not feel comfortable voicing it. To even the people they love most, it can be embarrassing, or maybe they're not excited about Mother's Day, right? And maybe they don't really get to say that because that's kind of rude to say, I'm not really excited about Mother's Day. But they get that opportunity. So a lot of times it's just kind of a simple process. And other times we, after a couple of sessions, maybe 2 or 3, 4 sessions, depending on how the rapport and the development of that relationship goes, we do dig a little deeper and find out, hey, you keep bumping into this same challenge with different people. Is that the way you're choosing your relationships? And we can kind of dig a little deeper, but it doesn't always have to get to that point, right? So we can kind of get to the deep places in a very at people's own pace. So that's really kind of what kind of unfolds, I would say.
I know in my own situation, one time I was dealing with a situation where I needed an objective third party.
Right.
And needed some truly disconnected from the situation to let me know whether my thinking was rational and made sense, or
Right.
whether I was fortunately I was thinking rationally, but it was so helpful to me to have an objective third party who could hear about this situation that had been wrapped up in emotions, and they were distant enough to be able to be objective, and that was
Right.
helpful.
And I think that's really important. I think one thing we're learning about, and psychologists have known this for a long time, we're all biased. None of us are purely objective, but it is the mental health clinician who's gone to school specifically, more than anything, to learn to be as objective as they possibly can. And so, you're not going to get pure objectivity, but you're going to get more than you would from necessarily a friend. And some friends can do it, but most are going to be on your side. And even as psychologists, I tend to, there's a little bit of a desire to be on my patient's side. But I think it's my job to try to hold myself accountable to objectivity. And so it's just a nice kind of opportunity to do what you just did, what you did previously, and make sure that you're thinking through things well, because we can all be biased. And I think if we can know that, we give other people a little bit of the benefit of the doubt and think we're maybe not all right. That goes a long way in relationships as well.
You talked about use of alcohol, or overuse of alcohol.
Absolutely.
I know that there are plenty of other substance abuses. We've got an opioid epidemic in this country,
Right.
in the world. So what would be the signs of a coworker with an addiction issue that might need to be addressed?
So they're just not usually going to uphold their previous responsibilities well. Often that it's going to be subtle. But I have a lot of folks I talk to that are functional alcoholics, and those are challenging because they say, yeah, I'm drinking 6 beers a day, but I'm going to work, I'm taking care of my family, I'm paying all the bills, I'm doing all the things I need to do. So what's the problem? And the problem is probably going to be gradually negative effect on their medical, psychological, and their well-being overall. It's such a slow process, they don't notice it, but they're just not living up to their capabilities usually. It's, in some way they're handicapping themselves. If you think about handicap, it comes from like golf. If you shoot a 10 under, then that's excellent. But if you're only shooting a 5 under now, you're just not, it's still great, but you're not as performing to your capabilities. And so they're failing to perform up to their level and their standard that they've previously done. A lot of times folks will drink a lot earlier in the day, and that's a sign of it as well. We live in Asheville, and it's a lot of our economy is in the alcohol industry. So this is one thing that's very important to note, is that alcohol is not the problem per se. It's how it's used, the function of it. So one really important way I help patients understand whether it's problematic or not is, are you doing it for reinforcement, like in this positive way that it's fun, you're hanging out with your friends, it's a social lubricant, you can talk a little bit more freely, versus you're doing it for coping mechanisms. So when it's a negative reinforcement, it's getting rid of anxiety, it's getting rid of the stress of a relationship. That's where we have to be more conscientious to say, hey, that's you're starting to drink for reasons other than just, you just finished a long mountain biking ride and you're celebrating with your buddies, versus, you're drinking all day before the event and after. And, really that, a lot of people get flustered when I say this, but if you're having more than 1 or 2 servings a day in general, it's excessive drinking. And so certainly if you're in that 3 to 4 to 5 serving range, on any kind of regular basis, it's going to be very problematic. And so, that it's the frequency, it's the volume of alcohol use, it's the change of their capabilities. And down the road, as people have been drinking a long time, they'll start having medical issues, some cognitive challenges, even mobility challenges, things like that. So.
In between, the quality of relationships, I imagine,
Right.
is diminished. So
Right.
if you have a coworker or a subordinate or whomever that is having an issue like that, I imagine, given the sensitivity of the subject matter, that it is really, really important to engage professionals and getting help for that individual and getting advice on that. I mean, I've utilized our employee assistance program to advise me on addressing personnel issues. And I have been able to role play, for example, with the employee assistance professional on how I should bring the subject up. Because it's incredibly sensitive. If you think there is an issue, it would be really important to bring in that professional who is the objective and trained individual to address the situation.
Right. Yeah, it is challenging and it's tricky. A lot of times if I quote the number of alcoholic beverages that's considered healthy and safe, I get, a lot of reactions like, that's not realistic. I don't feel anything when I have 3 servings of wine, someone might say. And so it doesn't have a lot of face value when you just quote the science a lot of times. But I think people who don't really study it and really want to understand it, they're feeling fine. But when you really examine it, you see the problems maybe not be occurring in any major way today, but it's really like 10 years down the road of that consistency of drinking.
Mhm.
And by that time, it's become alcoholism rather than a pattern of abuse or excessive use. And so that's why, and then people can't stop, or if they do stop, they'll have a lot of severe medical consequences if people stop abruptly.
Yeah.
So,
Well, one of the things that I was thinking about with the Great Resignation is finding purpose and meaning and balance in your life. And I'm wondering if any of that, if we've had time to reflect on those issues. There's good and bad in being able to go home. And in fact, I don't know if most people felt like I did. The first couple of weeks, I felt so incredibly productive because I
absolutely.
was uninterrupted.
Hmm.
However, after if you're not finding a sense of purpose in the work that you do, perhaps that's caused people to think differently, or as you mentioned earlier, stress. Are you hearing that from people as well?
The idea that people, the stress of this whole situation has caused people to step back, reflect on what gives them meaning and purpose. And if they're not doing something that they really love to do, they're going to go take and look for those opportunities. Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's what
So,
exactly what I mean.
yeah, so I absolutely that's happening. And because I've been working with some patients transition to new jobs or go back to school. I think anytime we go through traumatic and challenging events, it causes us to say, wait, it kind of gets us out of our fog. Our routines are wonderful. I try to get people to be in routines all the time, but there's a consequence to being too rigid and too much of a routine. And when we can, so there is an opportunity in stress and in catastrophe challenges to say, am I living the life I really want to live? Am I doing the things I really want to do? And so it's a wonderful opportunity. And we have the kind of the motivation and energy suddenly to put that into behavior. And so I think, while it stinks for some employers to lose their employees, there's going to be other employees who are coming to work for you that were doing the same thing, leaving another job, and they're excited to be there. And I think that's a process that we see in on college basketball teams. They go play for another team, and then another guy's like, I'll go play there. And so what becomes a leaving for one person becomes a transition towards a new profession for another person. And so I think that's good. I think it gets new talent mixed in, it gets new ideas. And so a lot of times things that shake us up, it is an opportunity. We've seen lots of businesses change their models of how they deliver service. And it's been very cool. And some places haven't survived, and that stinks, but they get to hopefully find a new way, maybe a new direction for themselves as well. And so, I think a lot of people are definitely doing that.
Well, and I think as a manager, I think it's incumbent upon a leader in an organization to provide contextualize what you're doing and
Right.
and why you're doing it, and remind people so that instead of just doing things by rote, to remember what the impact is on your community, or what it's going to be on your customer and their relationships and their family, in order to help people find and remind themselves of their purpose as well.
Right. Absolutely. It's an opportunity for them to develop those relationships, to be curious about what other people are going to be inspired by, to be asking that question, what inspires you? What's going to make you want to be here next year? And not just to kind of hope for the best. And they seem happy, but to really ask those questions. And as you were saying that, it just made me think, like we need problems like pandemics. I don't want them. I'd never want problems. I want everything to be smooth sailing. But in reality, with all the trauma and the challenges and the arguments, a lot of we do dig in, and we do think about who we are, and we need those things to kind of force us out of our stagnation a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to say it in the midst of the stress and trauma, but later on, there is going to be an opportunity, if it hasn't happened for folks listening, or folks that might experience it. There is going to be a time where we look back and say, I grew, that was good for me. It put me on a new path. It doesn't happen that way for everybody, but maybe we can be the ones that show up for them, for those people that that need that extra support that it didn't go as well for. And that's our purpose as well.
And people reflect to me that what some of the things that they were doing really gave them a sense of meaning as well. So I get, there's just good and bad in almost every situation.
Right.
How would you feel about taking some questions, Dr. Hazelton?
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Folks, if you have a question that you would like to ask Dr. Hazelton, he is willing to accept them. And I think I've got a helper who's going to help us figure out if you are interested in asking a question, perhaps you can unmute yourself and ask away. And then again, maybe not. So if people are building up their ideas about questions that they'd like to ask, if you were going to suggest to a person who is who operates a business, 2 things that they should do related to this issue, 2 things that they should do tomorrow in the workplace, what would you suggest?
Well, I often think more from an individual perspective as a psychologist, and a business is more of a system, but we can kind of apply some of the same principles. So when we think about managing the stress of the pandemic and the employees that are within that institution, we want to think about getting rid of the things that may be slowing us down. If there's things that we love and like, or things that are problems, like to address those problems so that the whole institution can work a little better. Sometimes it's good things. One of my favorite restaurants got rid of a lot of their foods and just focused on like 3 or 4 things that they could do really well. It took stress off of the kitchen staff, and it made it just more pleasant for the kitchen staff. And someone like me was a little disappointed that I couldn't get one of my favorite things, but overall it was a better kind of net win. So sacrificing some of the things that we need to where we can. And then also thinking about, while it is stressful to add stuff, ask your employees what they need. You might not be able to deliver it, checking in with them. What would make it better to be here? You might hear some things you don't want to hear, but you got to ask. And again, asking, you might not be able to deliver it, but just the asking, it means a lot to people. I'm sorry, I can't do that, but I will keep that in mind. And so, so adding things that might need to be put in place. So like an employee assistant program, or like a half day on Fridays every once in a while, or something like that, where we have we can all just go hang out together, have a meal, or whatever it might be. Thinking about adding those things in, it might cut into the bottom line a little bit, but retraining an employee costs a lot of money, right? And I know that business folks think about these things, but when life is stressful and they got a lot going on, it's hard to add those things, but it's vital. It's important to try to make a space for that. And then again, as I've said, probably too much at this point, if you know them, if you really care about who they are, if they're more human, I think that's one thing that our society is getting away from, unfortunately, is really each other's humanity. And no matter what side of faith, political, whatever spectrum, they have hearts, they have cares and concerns, and maybe they don't agree with what you agree with. But if you really get to know them, that's going to be helpful for the business. It's going to be helpful for our community, and we're all going to be treating each other better. And I think that's what it's really all about, is that we're enjoying our lives and treating each other well. And so if it takes losing a little money, maybe that's worth the sacrifice. But I think it'll actually make more money if we're taking care of each other and really treating each other like we all have a heart.
That's super good advice. We I periodically will do every couple of years we'll do a staff survey, and I was amazed at how much appreciation our staff members showed for one another, and talked about how happy they were to be together again.
Right.
That they wanted to be together more and wanted to do more in the way of, I guess, and after the desert that the pandemic was for social interaction, wanting to do more. So I think you're absolutely right. Asking for that information, figuring out what you can do is a great way to address some of those issues. So I'm going to make one last call to see if there are any questions that anybody would like to share. Well, hearing none, Dr. Garrett Hazelton of Advent Health, I want to thank you so much for your time and for your insights into these questions around behavioral health and what we can do as employers to help make a more meaningful place in our businesses and help everyone thrive. Thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And thanks to everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So I'm sure the recording is going to end any moment now. Thank you so much.